Hi guys, this is Creative Cuts, a channel where I build, paint and create things. Creativity and imagination is a wonderful thing. To conjure something in one's mind, somewhere without limits and full of curious freedom. In today's video I'm going to give you an insight into my creative process, how my mind works and see what I can do with a crazy idea. To give a brief bit of context, the guys at Fidelity were kind enough to send me one of their new Harlot Pro printers. Thanks again, I'm still loving it. And part of the agreement was to do a review video, link above if you want to see that, and also build something with some of the 3D printed parts. If you like these kind of building videos, then you can support the channel by hitting the subscribe button, hit the like button to let YouTube know where the good stuff is. And if you have any questions about anything, always feel free to reach out in the comments below. But first things first, every build must start with a base. And for today's video, I had an old offcut of some flooring. I cut this to size and then took a polystyrene sheet to glue to my bit of floorboard. With some hot glue, I was able to quickly stick the polystyrene down. I had found a cool STL file of a wizard in an imposing pose, and I really liked it, so I thought I could do something with it for this build. I had the idea that I could try to somehow mount an LED onto the top of his staff to make it glow. I had a couple of different types of mini LEDs left over from previous projects, so I played around a little bit and found a size that seemed to fit perfectly. I cut down the stems and then soldered on some wire, which, ironically, I actually stole from a different pair of LEDs. To hide the wire, I wrapped it around the staff in a decorative way. I glued this in place to fix everything down. Some thin super glue worked perfectly for this. I could now go back to my dry base and simply cut along the back of it to get a nice clean line. However, I suggest to use a sharp knife or you will end up with ripped cuts like I did. I wanted to create an old ruined temple of sorts for my wizard, so I started to mark out some simple measurements on my base. Basically just finding the middles, as this would make putting the next layers on top much easier. All I had to do was to keep all the lines lined up, and it kept everything nice and square for me. I fixed these down and then began freehanding some simple designs. Next, I used an old school modelling trick. That is to ball up some kitchen foil and roll this around over the polystyrene. This gives some lovely irregular indents and a super easy way to quickly add some texture to your model. Then I grab some XPS modelling foam. I get these in a box of sheets from Amazon, and interestingly, this is probably the question I get asked most about in all my time of YouTube. This stuff is a bit more expensive than regular polystyrene, but it is much more dense, so it holds details much better. I cut some basic walls to size. I also had printed out some basic Gothic arches and windows. Sure, you can build all this by hand, but the effort and often frustration involved in getting all the arches clean and equal is basically removed in the press of a button. I use these as templates to draw out the shape to cut out of the foam. Using a sharp knife this time, I cut out the shapes. I do the same for the windows. And then with a bit of gentle persuasion, I fix these in place with some hot glue. I had also printed out some more decorative items. This carved head, which I thought looked good over the main arch. Some small gargoyles, and these praying monk statues to use as carved corners for my building. I simply nibbled away a little bit of foam at a time until I was happy with the shape. I repeated this on all 4 corners. I then began to carve some basic details into my wall. All that was needed was a sharp pencil and some patience. Once everything was done, I was really happy with the result. And yet, although I didn't know it yet, my mind had already begun to expand the idea. My idea file had been corrupted, but more about that later. I continued to add some texture with my ball of kitchen foil. And next I had the idea to find some kind of clear bead that I could mount over the LED in the wizard staff. Now wrongly, I ordered glass beads, which, when it came to drilling them, was basically impossible. I ordered some acrylic ones, and these worked out perfectly. It just goes to show that even after doing this for many years, I can make basic mistakes too. All part of the journey, I guess. And now I have 999 glass beads to do something with. Who knows, maybe I can use them in a future project. Then I took some Magic Sculpt, a polymer modelling putty, and rolled out a couple of small sausages to cover the electrics at the top of the staff. This stuff is really easy to work with and is by far my favourite type of modelling putty overall. Next it was onto the painting. I applied a thick coat of primer with a brush. This meant that I could get into all the little nooks and crannies. For my model, I switched to my airbrush, as this way of applying primer is much thinner and gives you a nice really even coat. I also loaded up a little bit of white primer into my cup and sprayed this down from above. This immediately lets me establish my darks and highlights. Next I started by blocking in a few parts of the model. His boots, belt and pouches. Just taking my time and trying to be nice and neat. I picked a very light turquoise for his robes. I wanted to keep the model quite light, as I didn't want him to get lost in all the brightness of the LED. I chose a deep jade colour for his cloak. A thin coat was all that was needed, as I already have the shadows and highlights established in the previous step. I finished his cloak off with a simple gold trim around the edge, just to give it a little bit of pop. I mixed up a thin dark brown oil wash and let this wash over the model to pick out all the details. I also had printed out a base for the model and began to paint this with some similar colours. I was playing around with ideas and mock building the walls when that corrupted file idea that I'd mentioned earlier really showed itself. Suddenly I found myself wondering what it would look like if my wizard was in the process of casting a spell. So powerful, it was literally ripping apart the reality around him. Cool. Now where this idea came from, I don't know. But here it was and I couldn't unthink it. Okay, so I jammed my foot on the brakes of this project and took a hard left. If you don't have a plan, then you have no roadmap to stick to. Sometimes I like to live a bit dangerously and build things that aren't planned through to completion. Freestyle it, so to speak. This allows me to easily change my idea as new ideas arise. It introduces a feeling of playfulness with my building that keeps things fresh and adds a sense of discovery. So, after building my nice temple walls, I began slicing them apart, shifting the position and then gluing it all back together again into place. I kept going with this all around the walls, imagining how the wall might break up if met with a massive force from behind. All these bits of wall were getting a bit flimsy and I needed a solid base to work off, but I didn't want to commit to gluing it into place, as painting all those little cracks afterwards would be basically impossible, especially on the inside. So I came up with the idea to glue some little wooden spikes to the bottom of the walls so I could fix these to a scrap piece of foam without gluing them down. And then, piece by piece, I rebuilt the walls mid-explosion. I re-primed the cracked walls and then dusted over this with some medium grey. I then began gluing all my crumbling walls into place, making little cuts and alterations on the fly. I filled any obvious cracks in the walls with little slivers of foam. Once this was all dry, I grabbed some little scraps of modelling foam and ripped this into little pieces to represent bits of rubble. I masked up the wizard model and then spread out a thin layer of basing glue, onto which I then sprinkled bits of foam. I did the same for the outside of the building. And to further add some more texture, I also added a little bit of sand into the corners of everything. I sprayed everything black again, and then went around the brickwork, just picking out various bricks in different colours to introduce a little bit of colour variation. After this, I quickly knocked up a thin down wash of black and brown paint to knock everything back and tie it all together. When this was dry, I grabbed another favourite of mine, and that is moss by Dirty Down. The same company also makes a fantastic rust product which I've used many times on the channel, and works in much of the same way. Just paint it on and watch it react as it dries. I've found that using a hairdryer speeds this process up and helps kickstart the reaction of the product. I also wanted to add a few old leaves fallen from some unseen trees. I had a batch of some self-made paper leaves which I'd stamped out and coloured from a previous project, and these worked great for this project too. Just a tiny dot of super glue was all that was needed to fix them into place. I also added a few grass tufts here and there. Again, just adding a little bit more visual information and detail to the building, creating a sense of time, a history. My idea grew even further when I found some clear acrylic rods online. These would be perfect to channel the light from my LED to create a kind of starburst effect. I simply cut these to lengths with some cutters and found little cracks which I could feed the clear rods through, and then glued them to the bead of my wizard staff. I did this with the LED illuminated to make sure I was getting a clean contact onto the bead, allowing the light to travel down the clear rod and to shine out of the end. And that brings this adventure into the unknown to its natural conclusion. I hope I have shown you that it's okay to change your mind midway through a project. Trust in your creativity and imagination. If you are new here and you would like to stay up to date with all the latest videos, you can hit the subscribe button. Leave a like if you have enjoyed the video. This always really helps. And let me know in the comments below what you would like to see me build next. Many people ask me, what do I build these models for? Do I sell them? And my honest answer, particularly with this project, is because I imagined it and wanted to see what it would look like. This can be simple enough reason to build anything. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Enjoy.
Edificare, pingere e creare.